In today's society, zombies seem to dominate in pretty much every media outlet. From George Romero's Night of the Living Dead to AMC's The Walking Dead, it seems like we just can't get enough zombies in our lives. The same can be said about video games, with examples like Left 4 Dead, Dying Light, Dead Rising, H1Z1, and many, many more. Today, we decide to jump back 24 years and play the first zombie game to be released on the Super Nintendo, Zombies Ate My Neighbors. The development for Zombies Ate My Neighbors began in 1993, but the development was actually more of an accident than anything. Programmer Ed Killam designed a new bitmap graphics engine, which would later be called the Zombies Ate My Neighbors engine. During some free time, game designer Mike Ebert began to mess around with the new engine to see what he could come up with. The result was several new graphics demos in games. One of these demos allowed the player to open and close doors while a man with a chainsaw chased you. This soon became the groundwork for the game Zombies Ate My Neighbors. After the reveal of this demo, a team of only 2 people started to work on the game. As explained by Ebert, the team had a very low budget. After a few months of development, a team of artists came on board to help out. The Super Nintendo version was the first to be created, and it wasn't until about 6 months later, after the true potential of the game was seen, that the team started to work on the Genesis version. The Genesis version allowed the team to incorporate the map permanently on the screen, while the Super Nintendo version had to make the map an overlay that appears when hitting the L or R buttons. This is because the Genesis provided 320 pixels horizontally, while the Super Nintendo only allowed for 256. Additionally, Ebert has said that although the Super Nintendo displays more colors, he felt that the Genesis version was the better option to play. In the early stages of development, the game was simply titled Monsters. However, the name had to be changed due to a television show already existing with the same name. If LucasArts wanted complete control over the name, it had to be changed to something else. After several unsuccessful suggestions, they finally agreed on the name it has today. The game starts out with some creepy music as the title slide warps into focus. After that, we get the 2 options, Start and Password. After hitting Start, we are brought to the Player Select screen, where you can also pick between 1 or 2 players. The game is set up so that both players can pick the same person, which is kinda nice that the developers thought about players getting confused. After making the episode on Metal Gear, we truly thought that it would be the end of a game providing no story to us. But lo and behold, we found a game that is somehow worse at accomplishing this one simple task. Waiting at the title screen does absolutely nothing. It's not until you wait at the Player Select screen that it takes you to what you think is a cutscene. But it's at this point, you're disappointed to find out that you're just watching gameplay footage that provides absolutely no backstory. With Metal Gear, you could at least look at the back of the box for information. With this, you're provided absolutely nothing. Even digging through the instruction booklet gives you nothing in terms of story. If it wasn't for the internet, we'd have absolutely no information for you. A scientist named Dr. Thaddeus Tongue has unleashed a variety of monsters within his castle in the nearby suburban areas, which includes pyramids and a lagoon for some reason. He's doing all of this as revenge for those who destroyed his life. Even with all the research we did, we can't find out exactly where this story comes from. But it's the only thing that comes up when trying to find story for this game, so it's the best you're gonna get. The ending boss fight is your typical multi-phase boss fight, where you have to beat him in a spider form and then a giant head form. Once in the giant head form, you can wear him down to where you see a cyborg head underneath the skin. Once defeating the giant cyborg head form of the boss, you're taken to a credits level. This is actually pretty unique and unexpected. In this level, you can walk around LucasArts Studio and talk to the developers who made the game. Although this is very creative, it doesn't really add anything to the experience, and it isn't worth the time you put in trying to beat it either. When it comes to the graphics, they really aren't that bad. As you've seen so far, the game is played from a top-down perspective. While each level looks great at first, the problem comes when you go back to each location again. They try and change up how it looks, and somewhat succeed doing so, but not enough is changed and they end up feeling very similar. As with most games around this time, the music is passable, there's just a lack of it. There's a specific theme for each level, and that's about as much variety as you'll get. The downside to this is that if you're stuck on a level for a half hour, you'll be hearing the same thing over and over again. Although the music is tolerable for a decent bit of time, the same can't be said for the sound effects. It seems as if every sound effect is intentionally made as annoying as humanly possible. From the loud weapon noises, to the annoying sounds every enemy makes when they're attacking, or even the characters just getting hit, you tend to hear the same sound effects at least 100 times per level. This gets annoying very quickly, and it made us mute the sound for a bit so we didn't have to listen to it anymore. It's also interesting to point out that when your character gets hit, whether it's male or female, they sound like Bart Simpson. Here, listen to this. I think it's pretty fair to start off this section by saying this game is f***ing impossible. It might look like a jolly time from the clips you've seen, but when you actually play this hell of a game, your anger goes from 0 to 60 in about no time. Your main objective in every level is to find all of the survivors and obviously make sure you survive. Each survivor has a point value associated to them, and rescuing all of them will give you bonus points. When playing in co-op mode as we did, the person who rescued the most survivors will also receive bonus points. These points pretty much just give it the illusion that you're playing an arcade game. When you're out of lives, you'll get to see the high scores and where you're ranked among the built-in scores to beat. While trying to find the survivors, you'll run into a variety of enemies that all resemble typical horror tropes. You have your vampires, werewolves, zombies, giant ants, lagoon monsters, and pretty much any other old school style villain. These enemies are always a pain to deal with. Even if you're on a level that only has zombies, which are the easiest to deal with, you're constantly surrounded to the point where it's almost impossible. Now at this point, you may be saying, well, it's a zombie game, of course there's going to be a lot of enemies. To which, we say, you should probably play this game before you say such bullshit. This game takes the concept of putting a lot of enemies on screen and goes too crazy with it. Most of the time the enemies move so much faster than you, and if you hear a werewolf howl, you know you're pretty much dead before you even see them. As stated earlier, there are a few different levels that you get to play on. A backyard, a mall, a lagoon, Egyptian tombs, a warehouse, a haunted house, and a castle. That's pretty much it. You get slight variations of each level, but not really enough to make it interesting. And we didn't even mention yet, there's 48 levels to this game. Yes, you heard us right. You have to play through 48 levels made up of these 7 locations we just listed. This is one of the parts that made us want to give up. Luckily, we had a Game Genie to help us get through this game, just so we had the footage to show you. Aside from the torturous amount of enemies, having a co-op mode isn't too bad. It's kind of nice to work together to find the survivors, but there is one setback. If both players aren't communicating with each other on which direction they're going, you'll wind up in a situation where both players are trying to move the camera in opposite directions. This results in the camera just getting stuck until you guys figure it out. If this happens while you're being chased by an enemy, one of you are going to be either taking a lot of damage or end up dying. So if you're going to try this game with a friend, just remember that communication is key. When we take a step back from this game and look at it from a different angle, we realize that the developers intended for us to run more than fight, and stock up on as much ammo and weapons as possible for that final boss. However, it's not always made clear that staying on the move is what you're supposed to be actually doing. Zombies Ate My Neighbors has some decent graphics, but that's just about all it has going for it. The combination of so many pointless levels and the onslaught of enemies that overpower and outrun you really ruin any fun to be had with this game. The amount of repetition combined with having to hoard your weapons and ammo make for an experience that just feels unplayable at times. It seems like the only way to beat this game is if you've played it enough to memorize where every victim and important item is. It's because of all of these issues that we have to say this game does definitely not hold up.